Frog fans, welcome into the Frogs Insider post-game show. Jamie Plunkett, Jeremy Clark, Steven Johnson, and Melissa Triebwasser from the road, breaking down TCU's 41-28 loss in Manhattan, Kansas, to the Kansas State Wildcats. Guys, it was a crazy game. A lot of turnovers, not very clean by the Horned Frogs. Low energy for the most part, especially in the first half. But we're going to get into all of that. We've had a lot of comments flying in the waiting room already, all throughout the YouTube channel here. We've got quite a few folks just jumping in right away. Folks, if you have thoughts about this game, leave a comment in the YouTube chat or on Twitter. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We're going to talk about a lot of the stuff that we saw that went wrong today and some of the stuff that went right for TCU even in the loss. But guys, let's just open this up right out of the gate. Your initial reactions about how this game went for TCU today. Jeremy, let's start with you.
I mean, it's the same thing we've seen the last three times. I mean, start slow, turnovers killed them. It was kind of reminiscent of the Arizona State game. But there's just something about Manhattan, Jamie. I mean, they struggle up here. They haven't won since 2017. Kansas State gets out to another big lead today. There's not a whole lot. I mean, there's not a lot of positives to talk about. TCU just didn't play well.
Yeah, Steven, go for it, man.
Pretty much everything Jeremy said, man. I think, they started off – I can't even say they started off pretty well because it seemed it took them so long to kind of get that first touchdown. And then the game just got away from them so quick. I guess it wasn't as bad as 2023, but in my mind, this game might have been even more frustrating than what happened in 2023. If I remember, that K-State team ended up being pretty good that year. This is a team barely beat North Dakota, lost to Army, hasn't looked good all season. And this is the type of performance they might turn around their whole season just because they got to play TCU. So I know the issues in Manhattan predate Sunny, but I don't know what it is about this program when they play here, man. It's just – I would call this a collapse. I definitely think this is a very disappointing loss. And now look at the rest of the schedule, man. TCU might be lucky to go back to New Mexico at this rate. This is how they're going to look.
Melissa from the car, you get a shout-out from Marshall Newhouse. The dedication is unreal. Post-game show from the car from Mel.
That's awesome. And what's funny is I was just thinking, how you and Marshall's post game after the Houston loss set like our viewed episode, this one may take the cake for it. Because I completely agree with Steven. Like, this is among the most disappointing losses we've seen because of what we expected from TCU or what we believe TCU was capable of compared to where K-State was. The vibes were so bad. This is my first time in Manhattan. But from everything I heard, my expectations were higher for the atmosphere. And TCU, had they come down and scored or done anything on either side of the ball early, I think they could have taken this crowd completely out of the game. And so to just kind of fall apart the way that they did and show no real grit early and no intensity was super disappointing and kind of indicative of some of the problems that we've been kind of hinting around all season long.
It's true, and we saw a lot of the same issues today, especially on defense. When you talk about late down defense, TCU was not good in late down situations. Let me pull up the numbers here, but Kansas State was 9 of 18 on third and fourth downs again today. That's 50% conversion rate. TCU came into this game 122nd in the country in late down defense, allowing teams to convert 48% of the time. So they were actually even worse than that today. Kansas State converted a 3rd and 9, a 3rd and 11 early on in some of their drives that allowed them to score a touchdown to actually tie the game. And then that's when the wheels came off, is when it was 7-7. TCU gets the ball back. Backwards pass from Hoover, bounces off Ed Small's hands, scoop and score for Kansas State. A pick six a few plays into the third quarter, and the wheels really just fell off for TCU after that. It wasn't Josh Hoover's best game. He ended up with 376 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, but a lot of those were empty yards to Eric McAllister in the fourth quarter. But 26 of 47 with 2 interceptions today. Guys, what was it from Josh Hoover today that really kind of signaled to you that it was going to be an off day, and how did you evaluate his performance?
I didn't think they started so slow because they had 4 drops. I think Sonny said 4. They kind of had another one. The pass was behind Jordan, but you remember on that 2-minute drill right before halftime, they had a first down, I think at the 20, passes behind them. You got to settle for a 4-down conversion. You get a holding call. So I just think the drops kind of threw him off early. And then in the second half, I think generally speaking, I think the O-line played well enough. I think the O-line gave him enough time generally. Obviously, Kavorian Barnes had a great day. So despite, being shorthanded, I think the offensive line did a good enough job against this K-State front to give Josh time. But I think, Jeremy might touch on this in a second, but we just kind of seen this a little bit in Josh's career. When things kind of start just kind of snowballing, especially on the road, he kind of just evolves into the quarterback we saw from when he was still a young guy in 2023. At his best, I still think Josh is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, but I do think his floor might be a little bit lower just because you could just have these games where one turnover turns into two turns into three, and then one of those turnovers or two of them end up being a pick six and a fumble score for a touchdown.
Yeah, I said on the board, there's ACS Josh Hoover and there's on the road Josh Hoover. They're two completely different quarterbacks. And we saw that a couple of weeks ago against Arizona State, the turnovers, the bad decisions, the holding on to the ball. Thought we saw a little bit of that this time in the first half. I really think Kansas State was throwing some confusing looks. He had one attempt to Eric McAllister. You're not going to win a game if you're only throwing the pass to Eric McAllister one time. And Sonny even said that after the game. We did a poor job getting our playmakers the ball too late. Another interception for Josh off a tip pass from one of his own receivers. I mean, it's crazy. I think he's got 3 or 4 of those now on the year where his own receivers are dropping passes. But when you have receivers that are out there dropping passes at the rate that they were dropping, he had a beautiful throw to Manjack early in the first quarter that was right over the shoulder, perfect pass where only Joseph could have caught it, dropped it. And then it just kind of, like Steven said, snowballed from there. Every receiver just seemed to drop passes. But I'll say this, the most disappointing play that I thought was the pick six, because the pass was nowhere near Eric McAllister, and he had got sacked the play before, and I think he was just really trying to make a play, and unfortunately they baited him into making that throw, and it was an easy pick six. And I mentioned it on the board. It kind of reminded me of, I hate to say it, but it kind of reminded me of Sean Robinson against Texas that one year when he threw it directly. It almost looked like Josh thought the 2-5 was wearing a TCU uniform. It went right to him. So it was kind of disappointing to see that. I'm glad the way he was kind of resilient the second half and played up, but tough night for him overall. It's kind of crazy to believe he threw for 376 on the night.
Yeah, that number blew me away, Jamie, when you said it. I think that when Steven says that the offensive line played good enough, I think he nailed him on the head. And I think for Josh to be his best, he needs that line to be better than good enough. And I think that we've kind of seen signs of this, and that he's had a little bit of happy feet. He hasn't gotten through his progressions. He definitely missed some open guys tonight. And I mean, who could blame him when he's under duress? And he certainly wasn't super comfortable in the pocket tonight. Some of that I think was seeing ghosts, and some of that was, the defensive. I think the confusing looks that K-State threw definitely impacted his ability to go through his progressions. I will say, like, you'll never question Josh's character. We overheard a little bit of him talking to his teammates, and in the post-game press conference, he took 100% ownership for this, probably more than he needed to. I think the drops really did impact him, and I think that as much talent as that wide receiver room has, we worried that there was going to be some issues with the continuity, and Josh kind of spoke to that too, of that they just have not gotten that group together. They haven't gotten on the same page. I give him a ton of credit for taking accountability. I don't think this all falls on shoulders by any stretch, but definitely not his best game. And I think where he does have some flaws as a quarterback, we're all exposed today in a way that ended up making this a really negative result for TCU.
One of the challenges, too, when you think about the day offensively is obviously if Josh isn't having his best day, it's nice to be able to run the football. And while we haven't seen TCU do that very successfully at times this season, they were running the football pretty well today. Kavorian Barnes was averaging 7 yards a carry in the first half. And when you come out of halftime, you're down 14-7. It feels like it would have been a really good time to reestablish yourself on the ground against a Kansas State defense that has not been good against the run at all this season. And instead, we saw Kavorian Barnes get just 3 carries in the second half. His last carry of the day came with 10:28 remaining in the third quarter. And at that point, TCU's down 21-7, but you're still talking about a 2-possession football game with 25 minutes of game time left. It felt like they just abandoned the run. They basically said we're gonna win or lose on Josh Hoover's arm, and I don't think that you had to go that route when they chose to go that route. They only had 16 total carries by running backs on the day. Just wasn't enough from the running game, but it wasn't because the running game wasn't successful.
It's a bit ironic. Sonny, gave a shout out to Kendall Browse early in the week kind of thing. He really called a good game against Colorado, which I agree. I think that praise was well earned. But I think Kendall called a good game kind of starting off in the first half, but something happened after halftime. We don't know if KB got hurt a little bit or anything like that, but I agree 100% with Jamie. The game, Sonny said afterwards the game got away from him, but that was kind of more so in the fourth quarter. There was enough time to establish the run. I know Kansas State was trying to milk the clock, decrease the amount of possessions TCU had. TCU, I think, when you're averaging 70 yards a carry, as bad as this run game has looked the last couple of weeks, you got to feed Barnes. You got to give some of those younger guys touches, especially when it finally appears the offensive line is generating a push. So I do think some of the play calling let Josh down. And like Melissa said, this isn't all on him. They didn't call a great game in the second half. The receivers didn't play well. And you finally had a great running, or I don't want to say great. You finally had a productive rushing attack, probably for the first time since the first half against SMU, and you don't lean on it when the game was still in reach.
Yeah, I mean, I think they abandoned the run game too early. I'll just come out and say it. I agree with you, Jamie. I felt like there was still a lot of meat on that bone to come out. They were down at the half, but they could come out, establish a run game. They got the ball first, and they didn't do that. I mean, Kansas State was really playing a light box all night long. I mean, they usually had maybe 5. They had 5 guys in the box, maybe 6 at sometimes, but there was plenty of run lanes for KB to run through. He was getting some good chunks. I think what he averaged 7 yards per carry,
6.8, yeah,
6.8. So that's a really good day. And this might have been one of those games too where maybe it might have been good for KB to get over 20 carries because he was carrying the ball so well. And we don't know if he got dinged up or not, but just to kind of pile on a little bit. I'm not saying Kendall Browse called a bad game. I think there were some questionable things, but I do feel like they abandoned the run game too early. And if they still establish that early in the second half, we could be talking about a completely different game. But I know Josh is a great quarterback, and I know they can rely on him a lot because they had to do it last year. But when you're running at a clip, averaging almost 7 yards per carry in a game where we didn't know if the running backs or the offensive line were going to even be able to establish 1 or 2 yards per carry, they came out and they got the job done. But I really feel like the coaches kind of abandoned that run game too early. They could have got some other guys in there to carry the load as well.
Before we transition, I want to ask y'all something. When's the last time we could just kind of seen TCU like lean on a team? Like it didn't really matter what was going on with the passing game. They were just kind of grinding a team down like we kind of seen some of these other great teams do.
The Michigan game, Fiesta Bowl.
I was going to say at Texas in 22, right? That was a low-scoring game. They were up 17-3 late. And they just, everybody in the stadium knew that TCU was going to run the football, and they still managed to get, 2-3 first downs on that final drive to put Texas away. But we haven't seen TCU's offensive line be able to lean on anybody since 2022. It goes back to the conversation we've had a couple of times now on this show about the offensive line and how TCU is addressing that, whether it's portal players or high school recruits. But like you said earlier, Steven, the offensive line played okay today. They made this tackle switch where Ben Taylor Whitfield moved to left tackle. Quentin Harris was at right tackle. I thought both guys played pretty well. They had a couple hiccups here and there. Interior offensive line, I thought, played really well today, and they were opening up running lanes for the running backs. But at the end of the day, running lanes are no good if you're not going to run the football. And Melissa, I know you were about to jump in and say something, so I'll just kind of hand it off to you there.
Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure of getting to sit next to Jeremy for the second half because I wasn't going to go stand down there what's happening and take photos and nothing. But one of the things he pointed out was how much the game has changed with the clock rules this year and how teams are only getting maybe 4, maybe 5 possessions. And I asked Josh about that after the game, and I meant to ask if the reason they abandoned the run there, reason they abandoned the run.
I think we might have lost her.
She's in the middle of Kansas.
She got out of range. She got out of range of all the cell towers in Kansas. I'm gonna pull her off.
You lose me?
Yeah. Oh, yep. You're gone. Yeah, she gone. We'll try to get Melissa back on here in a second when she gets better cell service, guys. But let's go to Hoover post game, because I saw some of y'all say post game that he was emotional. He really took responsibility for this loss. When you have a kid who feels like all of the pressure is on him, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. He's the quarterback. He needs to be able to step up in big moments. As a coach, what are you trying to talk to Josh Hoover about after a day like today to make sure that a loss on Saturday in Manhattan, Kansas doesn't lead to a rivalry loss next Saturday against Baylor?
Well, if I'm Sonny, if I'm Kendall, I would just take ownership and say, hey, we're not doing enough to put you in the best position to succeed. And there's only certain things a coach can do, but whether it's giving more rushing attempts, we kind of noticed early in the game, they were doing a lot of stuff behind the line of scrimmage and maybe probably going to the wrong people. Maybe you put in a Major Everhart and you let him kind of get some of those screens instead of going to Ed Small, who had a really good game. So I think from the coaches, I'm more so focused about what I can do to kind of give Josh more support with the play calling, the schemes, with the formations we're using, and everything like that. And also just try to remind him that he is the quarterback, he is the leader, but he doesn't have to win these games by himself. Now, honestly, I feel like that's where Josh gets in the most trouble, where he feels like he has to carry the load on his own, that he has to make the play. You know, the game's getting away from him, so I got to make this throw. So you just got to get Josh to play within himself, and you just got to do more from a play calling standpoint to just support him and make sure he doesn't get to that point in the game where he feels like, I got to lead a touchdown drive here at the game's going to be over with.
The brilliant point I was going to make before Kansas happened and I lost all service is I wonder how much of this all comes back to fewer possessions. Like Jeremy was talking to me during the second half about, you know, you're only getting 4 possessions a half with the new clock rules. And so I think it does put more pressure on Josh, and it does make them feel like they have to abandon the run game early. But I think you need to stick to what works, and what was working today was trying to take some of that pressure off Josh by using the running game. You've got to keep him encouraged. I don't worry about him hang-dogging whatsoever. I think he'll bounce back completely fine from this because that's just the kind of character that he has. What I need to see is the rest of the team rise up. This team had no energy on the sideline the whole game. There was no enthusiasm after big plays. They started low and they stayed low. And Josh isn't really a rah-rah guy, so it was good to kind of hear him get after guys a little bit, or get after himself, at least in the long run. He needs to step up and be vocal leaders too.
There's another guy that was like Josh that took a lot of ownership and took a lot of blame, and that guy's name was Max Duggan. It seemed like every time there was a loss, Max was accepting all the blame. And I really feel like, to echo what Stephen was saying, I think there needs to be a point to where there's some things that he's struggling with. Quit going back to the well to see if something else is going to come up in the bucket, because a lot of the times the same thing's coming up. So change some things schematically, see what you can do. Again, I felt like the run game was there. I felt like the run game was there to help him out. And I really feel like it was almost, not to put this on Kendall, but it almost felt like they were trying to get Josh stats. And I don't want to say that because I know they want to get everyone stats, but it almost felt that way. It almost felt like it was forced for him to throw the football, especially after a couple of plays we'd see some good runs. So I think I love his leadership, man. And it sounds crazy to say it, but it kind of reminds me of like the Tim Tebow type, where he wants to accept all the ownership. And I'm not saying Josh is Tim Tebow by any stretch, but I would say his leadership qualities are right up there with it. The kids love him, and we overheard some of the things that he was saying to the team, and you could hear the team kind of rally. And I'm not saying TCU is going to go on a big winning streak or anything, but at least, you know, the kid he's not out there trying to throw interceptions. He's not out there trying to throw fumbles. He's not out there trying to get sacked. He is trying to help this team win, and we got to remember that at some point, that, you know, he's not trying to do these things on purpose. He is trying to win games. And I'll look at a team, where would this team be without a Josh Hoover on it? I mean, would these games even be close? So as much as we want to blame Josh for some of the things that's happening, we also got to give him credit where credit's due sometimes as well.
So let's reset here. TCU loses to Kansas State 41-28. They fall to 4-2 on the season. This loss makes it the 6 out of the last 7 that TCU has dropped against the Wildcats. Kansas State just has their number, it seems, and TCU certainly doesn't help their cause, especially in Manhattan. But the last 3 games in Manhattan, guys, TCU has been outscored 113-43. They've been outscored by 70 points in the last 3 times they've traveled up to Manhattan, Kansas. And I know that folks are maybe a little bit tired of the, oh, well, they play bad in Manhattan. And we just got to start talking about the inconsistency of this team overall. And I think there is some validity to those folks that are calling for those conversations. But at the end of the day, there is just something about Manhattan, Kansas that gives the Frogs a mental block. And it's not just football. It's basketball. It's baseball. It feels like it's across all the athletics department. TCU does not like Manhattan, Kansas, and I can't explain it to you.
I mean, I think just look at the receiver drop. Manjack has dropped maybe, 1 pass all season and maybe 1 or 2, and he has 2 in the first half on one of them would have been, I think, like a 20-yard game, maybe more. Another one was just an absolute dot by Josh. And we're seeing guys like Ed Small, Manjack, like drop passes. I don't want to say easy passes, but it was an uncharacteristic game for them. And I feel like that's Manhattan right there. When you see guys doing things you haven't seen all season or all day in practice, that's when you start thinking, is there a mental thing, or is there just, it's college football, man. These environments matter. And I think, even though I don't think this was a great one, I think Arizona State was better than what TCU endured tonight. Something about this area, even like you said, Jamie, I think the last couple of basketball games I've covered here kind of went the same way, where the games have just been just ugly. TCU starting slow. They're doing things that are just what we're not accustomed to them seeing. So I do think there's something to playing in Manhattan. This is the same goes for when teams go play LSU at Death Valley at night. We can't act like that doesn't matter, especially when we have all this data, especially in all the sports now.
Yeah, and you noted, you mentioned Manjack. It's worth noting that he suffered an ankle injury there and was not available for the remainder of the football game after a couple of those drops, which is why we saw Ed Small have such a prominent game today. 13 targets. He finished with 6 catches for 101 yards, credited with 2 drops. Eric McAllister, 6 targets, 4 catches for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns, both of which kind of felt like they happened when the game was out of reach. We did get a comment from Amphibious Angler, though. I would like to see DJ Rogers more involved in the passing game. He had 4 targets today, 3 catches for 27 yards, but this kind of leads us to that tight end room that we were praising so much against Colorado for their big performance. It did seem that they were a little bit quieter today outside of Chase Curtis's 1 touchdown catch.
Well, I think for me, I wonder, they love running like that, kind of like that RPO read flat where I think Josh can hand it off, keep it, or like pitch it out to Chase. I would love to see DJ Rogers use a little bit more in those scenarios, because I think he's just a little bit more elusive. He's extremely athletic as a tight end. I wouldn't be surprised if it's him and the kid from Oregon. Those might be 2 of the most athletic tight ends. I'm talking about tight ends that you give the ball to that can make defenders miss, pick up the yards after the catch. So I agree. I would love to see DJ Rogers more involved. It's been great to see Chase getting some of these touches, and he's made some big plays. So I think he still deserves the playing time he's getting. But when you have kind of like I don't want to call him an athletic freak, when you have a mismatch like DJ, I think you got to go to him a little bit more, especially when Eric McAllister only has like 1 target in the first half.
I think the DJ Rogers and Chase Curtis not being really involved today only got blown up even more with the performance Garrett Oakley had for Kansas State. 2 touchdowns. He looked phenomenal. TCU had a very hard time covering that guy. So obviously people are seeing how tight ends can be used as a weapon in an offense. And obviously Avery Johnson was trusting him a lot. And I think TCU has guys with that kind of potential, guys like DJ and Chase. And even Lafayette, and when he's healthy, Pimpton. We haven't seen Pimpton yet. I think they've got a really solid tight end room, but we need to see him a little bit more involved.
It's not a great sign to give up.
Yeah, and it's such a safety blanket.
Is
I was
Melissa
going to say,
still
it's such
there?
a safety blanket for Josh, and it's don't worry about me.
I'm waiting for blue and red to start flashing behind her.
It's just tough to see Oakley have the day that he had 1 week before Michael Trigg comes to town, right? That's a guy for Baylor who has been uncoverable all season, has made some incredible plays, and now you've got, as the TCU defense a challenge to try and solve in that regard next week against Baylor. But I will say, we've covered the offense, I think, pretty significantly here in all of its woes today. Let's pivot over to the other side of the football because I thought the defense, again, played relatively well. You look at the defense, they only give up 27 points on the day. They give up 343 yards of total offense. The secondary has a couple breakdowns, which we've become accustomed to. Jamel Johnson loses a guy in coverage, Bud Clark loses a guy in coverage. Both of those lead to passing touchdowns for Avery Johnson. But overall, once again, with its back against the wall, I thought the defense played admirably on Saturday afternoon.
I forgot what drive it was, but there was the drive where I think it might have been their first scoring drive when TCU's defense was playing pretty solid, and then you give up a 31-yard completion to Tibbs. Is it Tibbs that caught the long pass, and then a couple plays later, or maybe even a play later, Oakley's just running wide open, not a guy within 10 yards of him for a touchdown. I thought that drive was pretty indicative of what we've seen all year, just giving up big plays. And I don't like to say this about the defense because I think the defense played well enough to keep them in the game, but it seems like this is yet another TCU team and people that have been fans for a long time talking about complementary football. It seems like when the offense is struggling, the defense is doing great. Defense is doing enough to keep them in the game. And then when the offense finally puts something together, gets a little momentum going, that's when all four wheels fall off the TCU defense and they start giving up big plays. So it's we saw it a couple times today where they were playing hand in hand. Offense did good, defense got to stop. But it's just to me, I think the defense is doing enough for TCU to win games. They obviously held Avery Johnson to 29 rushing yards. I don't even think he had 200 or 198 passing yards.
Yeah.
So I mean, he did a good job of not turning the ball over. That's one thing that I thought TCU felt like they could do coming into this game is get an interception to take away with him, but it didn't happen. But I'm not going to call this on the defense. Defense played. There was moments where they looked flat. There was moments they gave up big plays, but I can't point to the defense and say, yeah, this is the reason why they lost.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Jeremy. I mean, I know Kansas State was just trying to milk the clock at the end of the game, but still, you hold them to 4.8 yards per play. You hold them under 400 yards. I think if we show most fans the stat line for Avery Johnson, you would say no turnover, but you feel pretty good about TCU coming out with a win with the way the defense played. I think it can be a bit frustrating at times to watch the unit because they give up so many third and longs. Me and Jeremy joked about this, but I wonder just like how good is TCU's defense on first and second down compared to third down? Because they put teams at third and long often. They just don't get off the field. So I think this is another game where it's a little bit bend but don't break. They're not a dominant unit that I think can really take over a game. They're more so just kind of clutch in the plays they make. So, but I think overall they play well enough to win. When you have 3 turnovers, including 2 to go for touchdowns, there's only so much you can do, I think.
I can answer that question for you,
And
Steven, about how – oh, go ahead, Treeb.
I was just going to say, like, I think the problem with this defense is if they aren't turning teams over, then they're counting on the offense being to outscore, right? Like they're going to give up 27, 28, 30 points a game. Hope the defense cannot score their opponent. We have not seen them enough rise up and really shut teams down. And I think, Steven, your point on the way that Kansas State played, Avery Johnson was definitely corralled, but also I think he made plays when he needed to based on the way that Kansas State was trying to play ball control and had 2 defensive scores. He wasn't asked to do a whole lot.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a really good point. And people in the chat are saying that the defense did not play well. Chris Cashwell says defense did not play well. Come on, guys, what's the standard? Jonathan Bender is actually defending the defense. He says the defense didn't lose the game. Kendall and Sonny crap play calling did. We got Devil Frog out here saying TCU couldn't even make a stop when they knew what was coming. But here's the drive chart for Kansas State in the fourth quarter. Punt, field goal, and then they knelt. Right? They didn't score a touchdown in the fourth. And a lot of that was because of the defense. And the defense was put in impossible positions in the fourth quarter. Hoover's pick in plus territory, the turnover on downs at their own 25-yard line. And both of those resulted in field goals because the defense bowed up a little bit, right? And so you only give up 6 points in the fourth quarter, which allowed the offense, if it had any juice today, to be able to try and mount a comeback, but it just couldn't do it. But to what you said earlier, Stephen, TCU was 122nd coming into today in third and fourth down success defensively, as far as allowing the other team to convert in those situations. They were 42nd in early down success. So they're a top 50 team on first and second down. They are a bottom 10 team in FBS in third and fourth down defense. Pretty big margin there.
That's jarring. That is jarring, because if TCU has a top 50 defense overall, you get that third down defense a lot closer to 50. I think they would be easily sitting at 6-0. Maybe at least 5-1, because the turnovers, you just never know. But I think it just goes to show how big the gap is about how well this defense performs on first and second down and what they do on third and fourth down.
It's pretty crazy. Jeremy, I know that before we went live, you brought up Julius Sims. We saw the true freshman safety playing quite a bit today. We didn't see as much of Austin Jordan, didn't see as much of K9, but Sims finished with 6 tackles, looked pretty good back there. What'd you see from that freshman safety today?
I mean, he's athletic, and the good thing about young players, they sometimes they don't know what they're doing for their own good. They just go out there and play football. And I think that's what we saw with Sims tonight. He was just making plays, just playing football. It's not bad to see a true freshman come in at that moment and get those kind of plays. So, you usually don't see him out there. You're either going to see Austin Jordan or K9. And I don't know what was up with Kylan tonight. He wasn't on the injury report. I don't even remember seeing him on special teams. But the thing that was impressive about Julius Sims is I think he's kind of worked his way into some more playing time. We might see him more against Baylor, and he's got great size, great athleticism, and he was kind of one of those guys when they signed that 25 class that they were kind of talking pretty good about, just kind of a hidden gem for that class. So hopefully he continues to play well.
Yeah, he earned some praise from Bud for the way he played afterwards, and I think K9 played in the first half, didn't see him much in the second half, and I feel like they would love that you could combine Austin Jordan and Kylan Jackson into one player. I think Jordan's been a little bit better against the pass, and we know K9's an elite pass rusher, run stopper as well too. So not sure what happened with either one of them, but I think it's got to be encouraging that you kind of just throw Sims in the game. And I remember he's getting coached up a lot. People are having to point to where he needs to line up, things like that. Really didn't matter if he was on the wrong side, the right side of the formation. He was getting in there, getting a lot of tackles. So always encouraging when the freshman steps up, has a big game. Hopefully K9 and Austin aren't banged up, so TCU just has a really deep rotation at nickel. But I thought he was probably one of the bright spots on the defense that was very inconsistent today.
Another bright spot, Zach Chapman, getting a big 3rd and 1 stop there in the fourth quarter to force a punt. Devin Deal getting a couple penalties on Kansas State's offensive line, had a big sack today. There were bright spots. Eric McAllister, when the ball was thrown his way, had a great day. Jeremy, like you mentioned earlier, that should have happened far earlier in the football game than to wait until the fourth quarter for that to happen. But look, I think there are positive takeaways from this game, but obviously it's ultimately a disappointing day for TCU to lose the game in this fashion. Now, guys, I'm going to say something really quick, and don't jump me. I know the folks in the comments are going to jump me before I finish my sentence here. But if you had been told before the season started that TCU was going to be 4-2 at the midpoint with losses on the road to Arizona State and Kansas State, I think most people would have taken that result. Most people would have said, okay, we're fine with that. Obviously, we would have liked to have gotten a road win, but there's a lot of football left to play, and to have a winning record at that point, you've given yourself a chance to do some pretty cool things in the rest of the season. That being said, the way TCU has lost these 2 football games, to just have a complete no-show from the offense in the second half at Arizona State, to just turning the ball over and being really undisciplined in Manhattan, Kansas, I can understand why people look at 4-2 right now and come away pretty frustrated with this football team. What's y'all's thoughts on that?
Well, I predicted TCU would be 4-2, so my predictions have been spot on. Pat on the back for myself, but I think
I earned a lot of haters.
But I think, Jamie, exactly. Oftentimes, it's really not about your record; it's about how these games play out. So let's say you're at Arizona State. If that becomes like this quarterback duel between Josh and Sam, I think that's a little bit easier to stomach instead of just like this collapse we saw in the second half. Even this, I don't think any way this game would have played out would have satisfied TCU fans. Kansas State's 2-4. Is Kansas State is 4-2 or something, 5-1. I think this loss is easier to stomach, but the season is still going. Like kind of how I saw how it played out. It's just got to suck if you're a TCU fan because you're probably a questionable pass interference call away from being 5-1. If maybe you just have a little more injury, you don't turn it over as much as you did. This was easily still a winnable game, despite TCU playing well below its standards. So the season is kind of still going the way I envision it. I still think 8 wins, 9 wins is still on the table. But, TCU, Sonny talked about it openly. They want to compete for a Big 12 title. And right now, I don't know, man. They're going to need a lot of help. And some of that help might come in the form of Levitt being out tonight against Utah. But competing for a Big 12 title seems far away. But still, I mean, they can still have a good season. 8 wins, 9 wins.
I think there's a lot of football to be played. And if you look at last year, there was a 2-loss team in the Big 12 championship game. So I'm not sitting here saying TCU is going to turn it around and win the rest of their Big 12 schedule and go to the Big 12 championship. But I'm just saying it's not completely over for the guys that are on the doom and gloom page. It's not completely over. There's still a lot of parity in this football league. There's a lot of, Kansas is playing Texas Tech good right now. You're going to see a game tonight in Utah where I think it's going to be pretty competitive. But I looked at this game. I expected 5-1. I had this game. You can go back and listen to the broadcast that me and Jeff did weeks ago. I predicted this game to be a loss for TCU. Just the stigma of coming up here and playing in Manhattan and the way that they lose, I can't shake that. And I know I predicted them to win in the bold predictions, but even in my question swap, I told the Kansas State guys that I felt like TCU was going to lose this game. And I was called I was called that I didn't know anything about football. So it's kind of crazy how things work out because you don't expect a 2-4 team to go out there and play the way they did tonight. I still think Kansas State's a really good football team. Have they played well below expectations? Absolutely. But when I look at this schedule, 4-2, it kind of reminds me of last year because everyone was looking at last year. They shouldn't have lost to UCF. They shouldn't have lost to Houston, even though TCU finishes with a respectable 9 wins. People could not shake those losses because they felt like they should have won. I think games when you're up 17-0 in Arizona State, that's going to be the UCF game this year. You had that in the bag, and your offense couldn't establish a run game to ground it out, just like they couldn't last year against UCF and Houston. And in this game right here, turnovers. But if you look at last year through the first 6 games, they were 3-3. They had a ton of turnovers, and what they do to fix it the rest of the way. One of the things they made was putting Savion Williams at running back, but they didn't turn the ball over as much. So I think if you fix the turnover issue, you're going to see a different squad because I still think that this offense and the defense, when they're playing at the level I think they could play at, that we've seen in wins like SMU and earlier this year against the worst team in college football, North Carolina, I still feel like this team has enough in the tank to get some wins. We may turn around next week and see that they're beating Baylor. Who knows? But I got that as a loss right now too. So I said earlier in the week, I feel like after what we watched against Colorado, that I felt that they would be 4-3 by the end of this 2-week stretch before they head into the bye. So hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully TCU can get it turned around at home because they play much, much better at home than they do on the road. That's for sure.
Here's my thing. If you guys can hear me, what's the standard? What's the expectation? Because last year TCU wins 9 games, and I don't think anybody looks at that and says that is the TCU that we expect to see. And Jeremy and Stephen, exactly for the reasons that you guys mentioned. Yes, 4-2 is not a bad record with 2 road losses when you look at the preseason, but TCU was up 17-0 at Arizona State, and Kansas State is 2-4. If they want to be an elite team in this conference, which is wide open for them to be an elite team outside of Texas Tech, nobody has more resources or opportunities than TCU. They cannot keep settling for winning games they're supposed to win, losing games they're quote unquote supposed to lose, and everything else being a toss up. And that's kind of what it's felt like for the last 3 seasons. Like something has to change here if you want to be a contender. Everyone talked about when Oklahoma and Texas left the Big 12, who was going to be the flagship program. And it was a lot of people's opinions that it should be TCU. And I don't think we've seen that. This conference has potentially one elite team, at least one team that looks elite so far this season. TCU not being in the conversation to be right there with Texas Tech is extraordinarily disappointing for the fan base. And I don't blame them for that. I think that the pieces are there. This is not a young team, and it felt like post game we got kind of some of the same things that we've heard time and time again. The talent is there. Something is missing, and I think it's completely reasonable to say that though 4-2 could be a preseason expectation, the way they've gotten to 4-2 is disappointing and not the standard that we want set by this program and by its coaching staff and by its players. So I think that something's not right. I don't have the answers. I'm not a football coach. And I think Josh said it really well when talking about that, yes, these are people's livelihoods and he cares and he's invested. I do think people do care and they are invested. And I'm not calling for anybody to lose their job over this. But I think that there's an expected step forward that was supposed to happen this year. And so far, it feels a lot like the first 6 games a season ago.
Chris Cashwell with a really good question in the chat. What is the standard with the money being poured in? Sports is literally a pillar of the school's strategic plan. And Chris is right, because when you look at what TCU has invested from a financial perspective, and when you look at what TCU has done from a vision casting perspective as a university, they have added athletics as one of the 4 main pillars of their strategic plan for the next 10 years. And I think this is all a part of just TCU pulling in the same direction when it comes to athletics as a pillar of the overall vision, because Sonny said, Mike Buddy has said multiple times since he took this job back in January that his expectation for athletics is to compete for Big 12 championships. And he's said it a couple times. If you're competing for Big 12 championships, in theory, you're competing for national championships. He has the full support of Chancellor Daniel Pullen, Chancellor Emeritus Victor Boschini. All of these guys and all of the TCU administration, both in the athletics department and for the university, are pulling in the same direction. And so it is a little bit disappointing, Melissa, to see the investment being made and the results not coming the way folks would want them to be here when you're looking at the total dollars. So I think it's going to lead to hard conversations one way or another, regardless of whether what happens with people's jobs, which there's nothing to indicate that anything would be happening or should be happening at this point when it comes to jobs for football coaches. But the investment that's being made is being noted by the TCU leadership. And Sonny has hard conversations with coaches, or Buddy has hard conversations with coaches all the time to say, hey, we're investing too much in this program to have these kinds of results, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, those conversations will continue to be had, and hopefully the results start coming, right?
Yeah. And to piggyback off that real quick, we've also talked to Mike, and he's been pretty candid about this. Not only does he think these next, 2 or 3 seasons are the most important in TCU's history, he's also anticipating another round of realignment, say maybe by 2030. And the Big Ten and the SEC are probably going to be looking at schools in the state of Texas they can add. Well, Texas investing like this seems like a pretty good addition, and TCU wants to be competitive if/when their next realignment comes. And I think as a kid from Memphis that grew up, I thought TCU was as big as University of Texas just because of what they did in athletics. So this stuff matters to TCU. What happened with women's basketball matters when they go to the College World Series. That puts TCU on the map, and I think really makes the school appear a lot larger than it is. I always say TCU small but mighty, but I know this is an important step for them. So I think if not this year, there's next year. That TCU needs to be in Arlington, within the game of Arlington. They probably need to be at Arlington. I definitely think they're in a – Sonny is in a very interesting window these next couple of seasons. This isn't the AD that hired him. The expectations are now extremely high, not only just because of what he did in 2022, but because of the future, what could come down the line. So TCU's investment, you got to see these more results soon for sure.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and call it there. David May with one final comment in the YouTube chat. Bright side is I have my women's basketball tickets secured.
They could be even better this year.
Everybody needs to go get on those right now, because that is going to be a very entertaining program this year. Guys, I'm going to finish with one stat, because I got a text while we were doing this live show from Stephen Show, the wonderful men's basketball SID over at TCU. And he said, I was listening to the show. TCU men's basketball has won 4 of the last 5 games in Manhattan, Kansas. So he just wanted to make sure that
Go
we set the
Steven.
record straight
My bad.
Oh man,
on air that men's basketball is not scared to walk into Manhattan, Kansas and come out with a victory.
Steve was a KU guy though too. He wants to make sure it's right.
Yeah, he's going to make sure.
He don't
He's
want
going to
K
make
State
sure.
giving you credit.
Mitch Smith asks, how many days until Frog Ball USA, brother? They played a scrimmage yesterday down in College Station. They got a free scrimmage at Lupton Stadium coming up on Friday night this week, starting at 6:30 p.m. first pitch. If you are an out-of-town Frog and you want a weekend to come back into town, come into town Friday, take in some TCU baseball on Friday night, take in the rivalry game between TCU and Baylor on Saturday
Come in
morning.
Come in Thursday night, watch TCU soccer play Baylor in a ranked matchup at Garvey Rosenthal. Then stay for Friday baseball.
We'll talk about all of that on the Real Frogs Insider show later. I know Jeremy and Jeff are going to break down all of TCU baseball's scrimmage against Texas A&M on their podcast later this weekend as well.
Yeah, you want to come on the show?
Yeah, let's do it. Guys, but thank you so much for another Frogs Insider. Thank you to the 525 people currently watching this. 526. Sorry that you just joined. But all the folks that watched, tuned in,
You guys don't want to
commented,
do this for 6 more hours while I drive
hanged
home?
out.
You
Yeah,
want to do
best
this 6
of luck.
more hours? Come on.
Please drive safe, Trieb. It's a long drive. We've done it before, I know, but just drive safe. Everybody else get home safe if you were in Kansas for this football game, and we will all talk to you next time. Go read Steven's stuff at the Fort Worth Star Telegram, read mine and Jeremy's stuff at Horned Frog Blitz, and follow Melissa on Twitter because she talks a lot there as well. But until next time, we will talk to y'all later. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.